I went ahead and cut the first shape layer and let it dry overnight. And everything I said about cutting this yesterday was wrong. So I set up the second layer for the way that I think is going to work better. And I'm going to talk through that now. So this looks pretty good, right? It's got the center of the flower and the butterfly on the same layer, and the interior and all the edges of this have been glued together, and the book pages have been glued together around the outside. So how I got there was I ended up gluing the pages together before I cut. That seemed to work out much better. So I've already set this one up. I've glued around the outside edges and positioned my flower so that this center covers up the center on this layer. And what I'm gonna do is slide this cutting board in. And it's a little fiddly because this keeps wanting to close because of the way the pages are glued. But mostly all I did was cut around the square where the image isn't. And then cut away close to the image, but not around the outlines. And then used scissors to cut the really fiddly bits around the outside of the image. So, and I got these lines that I'm cutting on by simply taking a pencil and drawing around the inside of the previous layer. Just getting me pretty close to the same thing. So when this was closed, I just drew along here, and anything that was obstructed by these images, I just used a ruler to rough it in. So the reason that this happened was because of the angle that I was holding the knife. I wasn't holding the cutting surface down enough, and so it kind of tore. But this is okay. It's not going to hurt it. It just went through one layer. And it's a good time for me to change my blades. I don't know if you can see this clearly, but the front of my blade is rounded rather than straight, and that's a sign that I've probably used it too much. So just in case that problem was because my blade was dull rather than the angle I was holding it, I'm gonna snap this off and use a fresh blade. Always use sharp blades when you're cutting. I have a big scar on my index finger to remind me of that. There we go. So now all of this is loose, and I can just take some scissors and cut away around the image. This will make it easier for me to cut it. So that's what it's looking like now. It's kind of cool because the butterfly is lifting just a little bit off the layer underneath it. So now I'm going to take a couple of layers here and I'm just going to start cutting my points. So now that's what this looks like. And once I get this board underneath it, I can clean up any of the cuts that are too large or too far off of my original cutting line. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut around the rest of it. Here's my finished cut on the sunflower, and you can see that the pages sort of ruffle out a little bit in places, and I sort of like that. It's not a perfect cutting job by any means, but I like the sort of unevenness of it for this particular element. So I'm trying to come up with a way that I can glue in some places and leave it loose in others. Like I'm thinking I should glue underneath these petals to hold this down, but maybe leave it a little bit looser over here so that this rolls up a little bit and shows the book pages. I don't know, I sort of like this effect. It's very different from this, which has glue all the way around it. So that's sort of something that happened that I wasn't expecting, but I like it. So now that this is cut, I can do the same glue job that I did on the other layers, which is applying glue and then dragging my finger across it to sort of push it into the cut pages. And I'm going to do that on all of the straight edges first. I think I'm going to leave it at that and let the rest of these pages sort of flutter up a little bit. So put this back in. What I've been doing is weighting the area that's been cut with whatever I can find. So I'm just going to let that sit until the glue dries.